Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We are studying the chosen people, and within the chosen people, we're studying from the book of Deuteronomy. We're studying Moshe's speech to the Jewish people prior to his passing as he reviews the 40 years in the wilderness. And part of this review is the golden calf, the story of the golden calf, a very sad story in our history, in the history of our ancestors. And where we're up to is Moses was up in heaven for 40 days and 40 nights. He receives the Torah from God, and then he's told at the end of the 40 days to go down the mountain because the people have sinned terribly. They have built for themselves a golden calf, and they're worshiping it, saying, "This is the God that took us out of Egypt." Moses comes down the mountain, as we studied 2 weeks ago. He breaks the tablets upon seeing the dancing and the joy, the celebration that's taking place with the idol worship. He breaks the tablets and he takes order into his hands. He destroys the golden calf. He grinds it up. He mixes it with water. He makes everyone drink from it to bring about the total destruction. He goes about punishing those who instigated. And now he says to the Jewish people, it's time to ask God for forgiveness. And each and every single one of you needs to spend time in intense and immerse yourself in prayer and begging God for forgiveness so that indeed we remain the chosen people, that we don't lose the mission. And I too, says Moses, I will try to go to God and speak to God on your behalf, begging for forgiveness. And the Torah uses the term vayoshav. Vayoshav, he returns. And that has the same root of the word teshuvah. Teshuvah means to return. Moses is returning to God. And he's going to bring with him the repentance of the Jewish people, the prayers and the requests and the bequests of the Jewish people, asking God to forgive them. So he goes back to the mountain and he climbs to the top of the mountain and he beseeches God on behalf of the people. Remember that until now, all that Moses has secured from God was that he would spare their lives. God said, okay, I won't wipe them out. But that's not enough for Moshe. Simply that they'll survive is not enough. He wants the mission back. He wants the chosen people back. He wants this to be the light unto the nation mission. He wants everything that we spoke about before to still be on. So we need to move God from being angry at the people to the point of forgiveness. Moshe had to retake control of the camp. That was his first line of business. And he punished the most guilty, and he established the law and order, and he brought about a respect and an awe for the law. And he demonstrated by his actions the seriousness of the sin, the breaking of the tablets. He destroyed the calf. He destroyed the myth that there can be anything of holiness other than God. And he makes it clear to future leaders that one must be willing at all costs to stand up against evil. He inspired a nation to seek forgiveness. And as they were praying below, he would be praying above. So I want to give you just a little bit of a timeline of the dates on the calendar that this takes place. The day that the verse is talking about that Moses reclimbs the mountain and he's going back to God is the 18th day of the month of Tammuz. His first trip up was what we call the holiday of Shavuot. His first trip down was the 17th day of the month of Tammuz. That's the day he broke the tablets. That day, the 17th day of the month of Tammuz, is today on our calendar a fast day. He goes back on the 18th of the Hebrew month of Tammuz, and he's there until the end of the month of Av. So what we're actually studying about in the text that took place thousands of years ago on the calendar is taking place exactly this week during the calendar days of the last days of the month of Av, which is where we find ourselves right now. So when Moses is doing this, you should know that we're at that anniversary right now on the calendar. Now, there were 3 journeys of Moses up the mountain. Unlike the other 2, the first and the latter, this one was not under positive circumstances. The first time God was in a good mood. He said, come up the mountain, let me give you the Torah. The second time is this time that we're talking about now. God is not in a good mood. He's angry at the Jewish people. They have just sinned tremendously. The third time, once again, will be after forgiveness. So what Moses is looking for here is how he can replace this divine anger and bring about mercy. And although Moses is bringing about forgiveness, nevertheless, we see that this period on the Jewish calendar has never been a happy one for the Jewish people. The destruction of both of our holy temples took place during this period of time. And many calamities befell the Jewish people during this period of time. As we know, at the 3 weeks or the 9 days, there's 2 fast days. There's a fast day on the 17th of Tammuz. There's a fast day on the 9th of the month of Av. It's our job till this day to turn these days around and to bring them to being days of redemption. We still have that mission, even thousands of years after the golden calf, to turn these days from days of sadness, days of tragedy, to days of joy and days of redemption. So Moses comes up to the top of the mountain. Now, let's just suppose, just for right now, that you're Moses, okay? You follow the storyline thus far. You were here before. You study the Torah with God. God gives you his own handiwork, the tablets to bring down. You have broken the tablets that God gave you just a few days before. You bring about forgiveness of the Jewish people, but now you want to bring about forgiveness from God. Remember, you've already gotten him to say, fine, I won't destroy them. I won't wipe them out. What do you say? What's your opening line? Hello, God, can we talk? What do you say? So let's take a look at Moses' opening line. He says, he speaks to God, and I'll just read it to you. Vayashav Moshe al Hashem, he returns to God because he's coming back up the mountain. Vayomar, and he says, opening line, Ana chata ha'am hazeh chata gedola. Dear God, they have performed, they have violated, they have sinned a great sin. The nation has sinned greatly, and they have made an idol, a god of gold. That's his opening line. So imagine you're an attorney in a case, and here's your opening moment to address the jury and the judge, and you stand up and you point to your client and you say, my client is guilty. He is so guilty. He's guilty of a terrible crime. Now, if you're a prosecutor, it's a pretty good line to say. But if you're the defense attorney, you're not going to get too many other jobs with an opening line of, he's not just guilty, he's guilty of a terrible crime. They made a god of gold. He did the sin. Why not? They didn't mean it. Or why not what I consider a far more legitimate line of defense? God, it was just a few of them. It wasn't a majority. It was like 1/6 of 1% of the people. That's it. Now, it doesn't absolve them because they should have, the majority should have stood up. The majority should have not allowed this to happen. I understand that. But when you talk about idol worship, God, don't paint a picture that all of the Jewish people were involved in idol worship. It's not so. There were a few people, and yes, it was bad, but a minority of a minority of a minority. That would have been a good opening line. And that would have been very truthful. It wouldn't have been any exaggeration. So you would say that he wants to open with a line of guilty, Your Honor, but with an explanation. You know, let's put this right away on the table, God. I'm not going to argue their guilt, but there's an explanation for it. The problem with that is we don't find any explanation that follows. He just leaves it there. They're guilty. And then he moves into the next phase of his appeal, which we're going to talk about a great deal. We'll get to that soon. But after he says the line, they have sinned a great deal, they have made an idol, a god of gold, he offers no explanation as to why they did it. There is no defense. So where is the defense then? And the answer is the defense is actually those words. Ana chata ha'am chata gedayla. This people, they have sinned a great sin. That was his defense. If this was a normal sin, I would have to find a defense. But this sin is not normal. It makes no sense. Chata gedayla. It's such a huge sin that there's no logic to it. And therefore, it must be insanity. Because we can't explain it any other way. It's too big for there to be an explanation. Moses is pleading insanity. There's no other way to explain this. This was not a rebellion. It wasn't normal. And you can't punish them for insanity. So work with me, God, to get them sane. Why are they insane? Well, God, you bear some responsibility to that. 210 years of slavery and suffering could make you insane. You see, in his opening word, ana means please. What's the please? Where's the request in the way he's saying please? He says, please, they have sinned a great sin. It's please understand the sin is so indefensible. And that's my defense. There's a teaching, Ein Adam Oiva Avera Ela Im Kein Nichnes Bei Ruach Shtus. A person doesn't sin unless the spirit of folly enters within them. Here, it wasn't just a spirit of folly. It was such a great sin right after Revelation at Sinai, to have them bowing to a golden calf and to say, this is the God that took us out of Egypt. It's so far-fetched that it must be insanity. There is a verse, a very powerful verse, that follows this. And to me, it ranks up there as one of the top 2 most powerful quotes in the Bible that is said by a human being. The Bible has a lot that's said by the narrator. The narrator is God. But God in the Torah also quotes human beings. He quotes what Adam says. He quotes what Eve says, what Abraham, Noah, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Moses, Aaron. There's quotes in the Torah, especially of Moses, of lines that they have said. And if you view from all 5 books of Moses to try to find, I would say, the boldest statements, the statements that you would never think coming out of the mouths of the leading characters of the Torah, what Moses says after this line, to me, is one of the 2. I'll tell you the line, and then I want to go back to tell you what the first boldest line quote would be, and then we'll come back to this one, which I believe is the second. Remember what Moses says, and I'll read it again from the text. Vayashav Moshe el Hashem, Moshe returns to God. Vayomar, and he says, Ana chata ha'am hazeh, please, dear God, this nation has sinned, chata gedayla, a great, tremendous sin, as I said, insanity. Vayas lohem Elohezav, they made this God of gold that you told me that you saw that they made. Indeed, they did. Here comes the line. The ata, and now. Im tisa chatasam. If you will forgive them, mission, we carry on. We go on. Vim ayin. But if not, if your answer to me is, no, I cannot forgive them, mecheni na misifrecha asher kasafta. You know what that means? Mecheni na misifrecha, I want you to erase my name from your book that you have written. If you will not forgive me, forgive the Jewish people, God, then I want you to go on your laptop. I want you to have your 5 books of Moses file there. I want you to do a search for the name Moses. It will tell you how many times Moses' name is found in the Bible. If you have the latest version of Microsoft Word, I'm sure Moses added. And then I want you to push the delete button and delete my name from your book. If you can't forgive them, drop me too. Now, I'll get back to this verse, and I'll get back to the power of this verse and why I call it from the boldest, most powerful statements in the Bible coming from a human being. But first, I want to rewind the clock with you. I want to go back sometime into the Bible. I want to go back to the beginning of the book of Exodus. So join me. We're going to travel back 40 years now. I'll set the scene for you. The Jewish people are enslaved in Egypt. We're not so familiar yet with a character named Moses. We just learn about his birth. If you remember the story, his birth is he's born, he's hidden by his parents, by Yocheved and by Amram for 3 months. The Egyptians are looking for all Jewish babies to throw them in the Nile. Moses is now hidden in a basket, and it's Pharaoh's own daughter that finds him. And he is raised in 2 worlds, in the Jewish world by his biological parents and in the house of Pharaoh as a prince of Egypt. The Torah gives us short snapshots of his life, pictures, little pictures of his life, little stories, very short stories of his life. But it paints this picture for us only so that we can develop an understanding of his character and of his personality. What are these brief stories? The Torah tells us that he saw an Egyptian beating upon a Jew, upon a slave, and he got involved because he cannot tolerate injustice. So even though he's Prince of Egypt, and he should be protecting of the Egyptian taskmasters, when he sees an Egyptian beating upon what he feels is one of his biological brothers, a slave, he can't stand by and just watch it. It's unfair, it's cruel, and he gets involved and defends the Jew. That's one story. The second story is he saw 2 Jews fighting, one with another, and he gets involved because he can't tolerate hatred. And the third story comes later, is when he ran away from Pharaoh's house and he saw shepherds in the city of Midian, in the country of Midian, and they were harassing women. He gets involved because he can't tolerate the strong picking on the weak. The fourth snapshot the Torah tells us is that he was a very good shepherd, that he cares for his flock. That's all you will know about Moses, really, until the story of the burning bush. But what you gather here from these stories is he's different. He doesn't take the easy way out. He's not there just because he's the prince to just enjoy the luxuries. If he sees injustice, he's going to do something at risk of his own life. And indeed, he needed to run away from Egypt because he got involved. And when he sees women in a strange land being harassed by men, he gets involved to defend the women, something undone at that period of time. And the Torah also tells us that he was a very good shepherd and he cared for his flock. That's the narrative we will get about Moses for the first 80 years of his life. We're going to focus a great deal more on the next 40 years, but for 2/3 of his life, that's all you get of these snapshots. And it's enough because it shows us his character. Then we get to the story of the burning bush, and he hears the voice of God, and God tells him 210 years is long enough. It's time for the Jews to go home, and that the suffering will come to an end. And Moses is all excited about the end of the slavery. But he's very perplexed. He's very disturbed because he doesn't feel worthy of accepting this role as the leader. And it's his humility that prevents him from accepting the job at first. You know, some of the famous lines that you may have heard, he says to God, "Who am I?" You know, you say, "You have heard their cries, so you take them out." And God will say, Asha, I will be with you. I will be what I will be. And he says, "Who are you?" And that's when God answers, Asha. Famous lines that we have comes from that conversation at the burning bush. And God gives him clear instructions, what to say and what to do, what to say to Pharaoh, what to say to the slaves, what to say to the Jewish people, how to convince them. And still Moshe comes back, but they won't believe me. So God says, okay, I'll give you some miracles. I'll give you some signs to prove your legitimacy. And the debate will go on. And as the commentaries tell us, the debate went on for 7 days. For 7 days, God's talking to a human being. For 7 days, this human being is arguing with God that he's not worthy of the job. And what's developing here in this 7-day period of debate is this personal, private lesson by God to a human being as to the way he operates things. Because Moses is not bashful. He continues to ask questions, and God will answer his questions. So Moses is milking this for all he can because, hey, if God's going to respond to a human being answering some of the mysteries of life, I'm going to keep asking questions. I'm not going to just say, yes, sir, I'm going. Let me keep asking. And he does, and he does. Imagine you had that opportunity to ask God any question you wanted and to get answers. But finally, after 7 days, Moses has no choice, and he's told by God he has to go. The staff that he has in his hands, he was going to use to throw down to the floor. It will become a serpent, various different signs to prove himself that indeed God spoke to him, prove himself to the Jewish people, prove himself to Pharaoh. And finally, he has to go. God says enough is enough. He makes his way to Egypt, and to his great surprise, the Jewish people believe him. Our ancestors believe him, and they begin to celebrate. We're going home. Pack the bags. Everything that we heard from Jacob and then from Joseph, that one day God will remember us and send a Redeemer to take us out and bring us to the promised land. It's not fairy tales. It's real. It's real stories. It's happening. This is the guy. God's going to finally take us out from our bondage. So there's excitement generating from the camp. The people are starting to talk. They're texting each other. They have WhatsApps, and it's spreading like wildfire. We're going home. We're going home. Did you hear? That's right. The son of Amram from the tribe of Levi. He came back. Remember, he used to be prince of Egypt, but look at him now. He's come back. Look at his stature. He's the guy. He's taking us home. And then Moses goes before Pharaoh. Miracle of miracles. He gets through the door. The guards at the door see the prince of Egypt is back, and they let him in. And he makes a bold statement to Pharaoh. Ko amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael, I speak in the name of God, the God of Israel. Shalach es ami v'yavduni. Let my people go so that they may serve me. He's following the script. He's following the instructions. This is what God told him to do. And he is given such a sharp response by Pharaoh. Who is God that I shall listen to his voice? I don't believe no God. I don't believe your God. And he is so infuriated by this that at the end of that first portion of the book of Exodus, Pharaoh goes ahead and says, Moses, you know how I'm going to reward you for your boldness, for your chutzpah? Up until now, every single day, the Jewish people, the slaves, have had a quota of how many bricks they needed to lay every single day, every day. There were taskmasters that supervised this, and if indeed the quota wasn't filled, there would be Jews responsible to see to it that the quota was filled, and if they didn't get filled, these individuals would get whipped by the end of the day. So those who would be online to get whipped would see to it that those under them would fulfill the quota because they didn't want to get whipped. But we, says Pharaoh to Moses, out of the goodness of our heart and the kindness of our souls, we provide them the material, which means every morning at the work site, the bricks are there, the cement is there, the lime is there. They merely have to finish a quota of the laying of the bricks. But because you came to me with such a chutzpahdik request that I should let them go so that they can have holiday in the wilderness and serve God, from this point forward, I will not give them any supplies, any material. They're going to have to make their own bricks and find their own cement and make their own lime. But the quota remains the same, which is impossible. And therefore, Jews were being beaten every single day because it was impossible to meet the same quota as the day before. That's how Pharaoh responded to Moses. And now the Jewish people see Moses again. And now they're not celebrating. Now their backs are bloody from being whipped. And they say to Moses, thank you so much. Look what you did to us. Who asked you to come here? Look what you've done. You've given him the knife to stab us. You've given him the ability to hurt us more. Thanks to you. We didn't ask you to come here. You did this to us. You did this to us. You're Moses. What do? You've just been turned on by your people that you came to save. But at the same time, they're bloody. So do you turn to God and you say, okay, what next? What am I supposed to do next? I followed the script. It doesn't seem to be working. Do you say the standard line to the Jewish people, which would be, hang in there, have some faith. God's going to take care of you. He promised. God doesn't break a promise. Don't worry about it. Tomorrow will be a better day. The sun will come out tomorrow. No. Instead, Moses unleashes, I use that term, unleashes a protest against God. It wasn't just a complaint. It was an outright protest, an attack, using the strongest language. He hides no words. It's the very end of the first portion of the book of Exodus. It's verse 22. And he uses the words, Lama hare osa la'am hazeh, lama zeh shelachtani. Why have you done evil to your people? And why did you send me? Lama hare osa. Hare osa has the word ra, evil. He accuses God of behaving in an evil manner towards the Jewish people. And if that's your plans, to behave in such a way, why did you ever send me? Do you see the parallel? And I'll get back to explaining this line of Moses between the line that we're studying of Moses by the golden calf, delete me from your book, and this line, why are you dealing evil with your people? There is a boldness to Moses that he speaks in the most powerful of words. And each time he says it, if you're hearing it for the first time, there is something about it that makes you tense of, oy vey, what's God going to do after hearing that? How is he going to punish Moses for saying it? You know what it's like? Sometimes you hear a student saying something to a teacher and you say, oh my gosh, he's going to get it. He's going to get it. That's how you feel. Moses saying to God, why have you done evil to your people? It's like, you can't talk to God that way. But Moses does. Two different verses, two different stories, but the same Moses. And what's the common denominator between the two verses? His love and protection for the people. That's what comes first. His love and protection and defense of the people he was asked to lead. If you gave me this job to lead, then I'm going to have to lead them. And that's going to have to be my priority. I was not given the job to be tzaddik of the world, holy man of the world. That wasn't the title you gave me. That wasn't the assignment you gave me. You gave me the assignment to lead these people. Then they have to survive. And if they're all wiped out, then I've failed. Let's get back to that first verse. Why have you done evil to your people? Why did you send me? It's so powerful and it's so honest. I'd like to make a number of observations just from this verse alone. And some of you may have heard me make these observations about this verse. Number one, that there is no religion in the world that would have recorded in its holiest book, its leading man, its holy man, its prophet, unleashing an attack on God. No religion has this. And this should prove to you the honesty of the Torah, that Moses is upset with God and his words are recorded for all of us to read and to study for all of eternity. It's not deleted from the book. It's not hidden from the book. It's there. This is what Moses said. We've always believed that if God would only come and talk to us, everything would be okay, right? We have struggled with faith because God is hidden. But if God would only come talk to us, we wouldn't struggle with faith. I have doubts, I have confusion, I have questions. But if God would meet me every morning and say, good morning, Moshe, and I would be able to ask him my questions, that's all I would need. Everything would be okay. How much more so if he gave me a day, a full day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days to continue asking my questions? Here we have Moses, who had 7 days of conversation with God. And yet after the 7 days, when things don't go right and don't go the way he expected, he is protesting. He is confused. He's more confused than the rest of the Jewish people. He's the only one yelling. And this is so important for our understanding of Judaism, that it's okay at times to be upset and to be confused. Our very name Yisrael means to wrestle with God. There are times that we struggle with our faith. See, we have to separate faith that there is a God with faith that everything is okay. Moses knows there's a God. Moses knows God created the world. Moses knows God is watching. He has no doubts. His problem is that he just witnessed the suffering of others. He watched with horror as Jews were being beaten for not fulfilling an impossible quota. And they're crying in pain. And Moses is not about to go to them and say, it's okay, tomorrow will be a better day. He protests. He fights. He battles. It's not a condition that he can accept. He can't go to sleep that night. Most surprising is how God responds to that verbal attack by Moses. He doesn't. There's a response, but it's not the one that answers Moses' question. Moses has a question mark in his verse. Why are you behaving with evil to this people? Question mark. Why did you ever send me? Question mark. God will not respond to those questions. God will say, now you're going to see what's going to happen to Pharaoh, and I'm going to take them out of Egypt. He's going to do a lot of reassuring, but he never answers the question. Now, I'm sure God has a reason for everything, but he chose not to share it. And he chose not to tell Moses the answer. And on top of that, he chose to keep Moses' question and his question mark and his bold statement and his protest in the Torah left unanswered. Even though the author is not responding to the question, he left it in because he wants us to understand that it's okay to question and that we don't become satisfied with suffering. We don't become at peace with suffering. God wants us to question the suffering of others. He doesn't want us to become comfortable with it. He wants us, upon seeing someone in pain, to cry out like Moses did from the depths of his heart and soul, why are you doing this to this person? This person deserves better. I expected better from you. It's so honest and it's so true. We don't just throw faith in someone's face who's in pain by saying, where's your faith? We recognize that there's real emotional or physical or psychological pain, and it hurts, and we cry out to God to please heal and to heal now. When God responds and he says, now you will see, there's an interpretation that I appreciate so much. The interpreter says, the commentator says that God uses the word now. Now we have a leader. That in the way God was challenging and testing Moses to see what will Moses do when things don't go according to plan. Will he take God's side and say, people just have faith? Or will he protest like he did? And when Moses protests and is willing to put his relationship with God on the line, God says, now we have a leader. That's the leader I need. That's the leader this people needs. Someone that's going to be there for them through the good times and through some of the very bad times, because this nation, to be a chosen people, to be a chosen nation, to speak out against immorality throughout the history of the world, is going to face some very dark times. And its leaders need to be able to be there on their side and to give them comfort and to give them strength and to protest when protest is needed. See, I believe that Moses a few months earlier would never have spoken this way. I believe that only after the burning bush and the closeness of their relationship, Moses has the strength to speak this way, because you're more disappointed when someone you love and feel close to lets you down than when a stranger does. Moses felt he was in a relationship with God. We had something there, right? 7 days we spoke. 7 days we were speaking openly. I thought I knew you. I thought you were straight with me. What happened? That close relationship is what demands this protest. And in God's response, God plays this balancing role because he's building the faith that there will be redemption. But at the same time, God is very careful not to suppress the compassion that Moses just showed. You don't get a line from God, don't speak to me that way. Moses, I understand you're disappointed, but have some respect for me. He doesn't say that. He keeps that there because he wants us to know that faith doesn't and should not contradict compassion for one who's suffering. That faith does not and should not contradict crying out when someone's in pain. That faith does not and should not contradict wrestling and being upset with God about a tragedy. It's because we have faith that we can. And so that brings us to this second line, the line from the story of the golden calf. Moses is saying to God, almost an ultimatum. This is what it comes down to. I know what they did. You know what they did. You saw what I did below. You saw where they stand. We've destroyed the golden calf. We've punished those responsible. They're begging to you at this very moment for forgiveness. God, what's it going to be? What's it going to be? And quite possibly, we know that Moses, when he went up for this prayer session, stayed up there for, again, 40 days and 40 nights. He comes down at the end of the month of Av. It's very possible that this verse that I read to you about delete my name from your book is his closing line. It's his last line. And his last line is this ultimatum. If I have accomplished anything here for the past 40 days and asking for their forgiveness, good. But if not, delete my name from your book. I can't be part of your book. So do we want to move on with the chosen people mission? Do we want to get back to the mission of the chosen people, back to the study of the commandments, back on track with going into Israel? Is that back on the agenda? Or did we hit a brick wall? Have we stopped right here? Does it not go any further? Now, we have to ask this question. Who does Moses think he is to tell God to delete my name from your book? You know, I don't recall anywhere else where God needed anyone's permission to put their names in the books. I did not find anywhere in Jewish literature, Talmudic literature, a release form signed by Adam and Eve to write their story in the Bible. I didn't find such a release form by Noah. I didn't find agents of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob having a session with God to discuss the terms of their permission, to grant God permission to put their name in the book, and how much royalties are they going to get. Do you imagine the discussion if we gave this over to some Jewish attorneys to talk about royalties for the most sold book in the history of the world? Hey, for every book you sell and you got my name in there, a quarter. That would be a nice profit. Moses says, delete my name from your book. You didn't write this book. I don't need your permission to put your story. I'm God. Do we have anywhere else where God is going to request permission? So Rashi, the classic commentator, softens it just a bit. And what he says is Moses is not demanding. He doesn't have his attorney here with his rights and his copyright rights. But he's asking as a favor. He's begging, please. If you can't forgive them, please, I'm asking a favor. Take my name out of your book. Why? Because I don't want to be known as a failed leader for all of eternity. My accomplishments and anything I've accomplished in my life up until this point is totally meaningless if I don't bring about forgiveness for the Jewish people. I don't want the life story to be told over and over and over of a failed man and of a failed mission. Yeah, I took them out of Egypt, but it's not a victory story. It's not a story about Exodus. It's a story about failure. I prefer to be forgotten by history than to be remembered for this failure. Moses knew that he was part of a story. He knew that God was working through him. The Exodus, the splitting of the sea, the manna, the revelation, the study of Torah and mitzvot. But if the relationship was not rebuilt between God and the Jewish people, then all that was accomplished until now would be meaningless. You asked me at the burning bush to lead them, to be their leader, to bring them to you, to bring them to be your servants on the mountain. It's been a great ride. But if you don't consider them your servants anymore, if you think of them only as sinners, then I failed you and I failed them. And therefore, there's nothing to write about me. Nachmanides translates this slightly differently. He explains that the book that Moses is talking about is the book of life. And Moses was pleading with God that if you can't forgive them, then take me out of life, meaning put their sin on my shoulders. Wipe me out instead. Take me. Let your anger out on me. And these weren't just poetic words. They weren't just empty words. He meant it. I failed. The leader failed. If the nation fails, it's my failure. No matter what. I was given a task, and therefore I must pay the price. I should have foreseen the possibility. I should have given Aaron some manpower of support just in case something like this happened. I should have never allowed the Erev Rav to join the Jewish people in the exodus of Egypt. That was my decision, and it was a failed decision, and I'm paying the consequences for it right now. I should have made sure that they understood the 10 Commandments in all of its clarity before leaving. I should have been wary of all the gold that they had. It's my fault. My fault. So God, if I didn't get through to you about forgiving them, I'm begging you, take my name out of the book of life. Take me. I'll stay here. I won't go back. I'll end my life right here. Find a different leader. Give a different leader, another leader, a chance at success because I didn't have it. That's the power of Moses. That's the power, the passion of this man, of how he felt about this job as a leader of the people. In both the very beginning of his career, the middle of his career, the very end of his career, of this 40-year period of him leading us and our ancestors, Moshe's common denominator is every single time he finds a way to explain to God that first and foremost, his loyalty has to be to saving them, to helping them, to guiding them, to inspiring them. That's the power of Moses. We'll continue next week with the response of God to this very daring statement, to this very bold statement, and see how God responds. And we'll go further in our discussion of the book of Deuteronomy, of Moses' final speech to our ancestors, to instill within us until this very day the mission of the chosen people, how important, how critical it is for the entire world. And in fact, the whole world rests upon our success of being a light unto the nations. I want to wish everyone a very happy week, a healthy week. Stay safe out there. We'll look forward to hearing from you throughout the week. And we'll see you back next Wednesday at 12:30. If anyone ever misses a class, you can always go on YouTube. It takes a few hours for it to load up. But if you go to youtube.com/, whatever you call it, Rabbi Moshe Bryski. Bryski is spelled B-R-Y-S-K-I, not B-R-I-S-K-Y. I'm not sure why, but it's a Polish name, and that's just the way it is. Rabbi Moshe Bryski. If on YouTube there's a page, all of the classes and the sermons I load up onto that particular page. It takes about 2 hours after class. We'll see you back next week. Take care, everyone.